Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for spending your lunchtime with us. I appreciate it. Um, as you all know from signing up, this webinar is exploring local to global connections and how the diaspora are mobilizing climate action, both here amongst their communities in the UK and internationally through climate and environmental initiatives. So to introduce myself, I'm Fumida Mia, a program manager at Climate Outreach, which is a charity that focuses primarily on public engagement with climate change. This particular webinar comes under our migration program, so a program dedicated to exploring the interconnections between climate change and migration. Alongside the day job, I also help run a network called Bangladeshi Diaspora Climate Action, where various Bangladeshi diaspora across the UK leverage our skills, expertise, and connections to support climate initiatives and awareness raising in our communities and also in Bangladesh. So one of the reasons we put together this session today is because we know the UK is home to many, many diasporas from all over the world, many of whom are working very hard to support those facing climate change in various ways, whether that's through remittances, which is probably what most people are familiar with, as the diaspora are very generous with sending money abroad to support vulnerable communities, often their own families. Or the support comes in many other forms, such as passing on indigenous knowledge and traditions, skill sharing, arts and culture, policy making, and much more. So this space is to highlight some of the different and creative ways diaspora are showing up for the most vulnerable in the face of climate change. I'm really excited to have like a really fascinating group of people who are kind of coming to this work from different angles. So I want to also acknowledge some of the context in which the diaspora are working, and not just working, but also just existing within. We know injustice, like justice, is often intersectional. So not only are we witnessing a increasingly hostile environment directly impacting the lives and dignity of refugees, asylum seekers, migrants, communities of color across the country are also being targeted by the media, politicians, and the far right alike. Alongside this, anti-climate narratives are often weaponized too. We know climate change is something that disproportionately impacts the global south after centuries of colonial extraction, capitalism, ecocide, which has left many of the most countries that we consider climate vulnerable under-resourced to deal with sudden and extreme climate impacts. And not only does climate change disproportionately impact the global south, this injustice and inequality shows up much more nationally and locally too. A recent Carbon Brief report found that England's most ethnically diverse areas are 15 times more likely to face extreme heat, alongside a Friends of the Earth report, which found that people of colour and the working class are vastly overrepresented in neighbourhoods facing high levels of air pollution. So given this like hostile and complicated context, the diaspora show up for their communities, not only their communities, but those globally. And some of the global communities we'll mention today include Bangladesh, Somalia, Sierra Leone. But it's not all doom and gloom. I kind of say that because I say all this because I think it's really important to acknowledge this work isn't easy, and we're working within a very like complicated context. But a lot of the actual work happening from the diaspora is full of like joy and hope and brings the conversation back to one about justice, solidarity, and the international community. And I think, you know, given the challenges we're facing, it's amazing that we're able to do that. So that's exactly the sort of themes I think our excellent lineup of speakers will be showcasing as well. So before I hand over, I'm going to do some very quick intros. The people joining this panel are really excellent. Like the stuff they'll share is probably only like a tiny bit of what they actually do. They wear multiple hats. So firstly, we have Samia, a London-born Sierra Leonean, a climate educator, facilitator, and the founder of the People's Arc, which focuses on making climate and environmental education accessible to the working class and marginalized communities. We also have Fozia, co-founder of Dakan Collective, whose practice seeks to build imaginative futures using everyday materials, creating spaces of community, joy, and healing that center the full range of Somali diasporic experiences. And then we also have Mahian, co-founder and CEO of Pushpa, a diaspora fund that invests in the economic growth of Bangladesh. By mobilizing those with South Asian roots, Pushpa provides capital to tackle societal and environmental challenges and works to support building a sustainable future for communities across Bangladesh. Okay, so before I hand over, we do have the Q&A box also open. So please do drop in any questions there, and I will be sure to carve out some time during the end to get to some more discussion. Okay, I think I will hand over to Mahian, if you don't mind going first.
Sure, no, thank you. Thanks for the nice introduction. I'm just gonna, can everyone see the screen?
I think it's still loading up for me. Give it a second. Yeah, there we go, it's up.
Is that it? We
Yeah,
on? Perfect. I'm just gonna move this out the way. Right, well, thank you first and foremost for inviting myself and Pushpa. As you said, I'm Mahian, co-founder and CEO of Pushpa. Just to start with, given this is all about climate, Bangladesh is going to lose 17% of its land to rising sea levels by 2050. And that's where 30 million people currently live. And my family's from Bangladesh, so is my community here in the UK. And when we talk about climate change, we're not talking about some abstract future problem. We're talking about our families, our villages, and places that we actually know by name. So these 30 million people, these families, these farmers, these entire communities that face displacement is happening now. And the floods are getting worse, the cyclones are getting stronger, and the people that most affected are the ones who've probably contribute, or actually not even probably, definitely contributed the least to causing it. And when these disasters hit, these aid organizations show up, they provide emergency relief, and then they leave, and that happens all the time. But if you're a farmer in say northern Bangladesh, you're facing floods every year. The emergency relief doesn't help you the next season. You need income stability. You need better farming techniques. You need to be less dependent on systems that exploit you. And for us, climate adaptation is about economic resilience. So people need to be able to earn a sustainable living in places that are becoming harder and harder to live in. And I guess that's where the diaspora come in. The Bangladeshi diaspora sends over about 21 billion back home every year. That's more than the entire aid budget that Bangladesh receives. So most of that money goes to family expenses, which is obviously important, but very little goes towards building sustainable systems. And at Pushpa, we asked, what if we mobilize the diaspora community differently and not as donors, but actually as investors? So investors in our own community's futures. So we've got the capital, we've got the context, we know which problems are worth solving just because we've lived them or our families are living them right now. And a quick summary.
Mahian, sorry
Oh,
to interrupt. I
yeah,
think the slides aren't moving. I don't know if
they're
it's
not.
just for me though. Maybe try resharing them.
Ah, damn. Okay, let me just try again. 2 seconds.
No worries.
Is that better?
Yeah, yeah, I can
Are you
see
seeing it
different
now?
slides now. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, it seems to be moving
Sorry.
now. Thank you.
No worries. Can you see, is it moving now or is it stopped?
Uh, if you keep trying to move it, it's on the, oh yeah, there we go. It's moving. Yeah, it's moving now.
Is it on the problem?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Apologies for that. It
Cool.
worked
No
in
worries.
our prep session before. And if you miss
No
the
worries.
slides, I think they're cool slides. Okay, hold on.
Yeah, don't worry. Feel free to go over them again.
Cool. No, that's fine. So, like I said, I mean, I sort of laid out the problem, right, for Bangladesh's challenges in relation to climate earlier on. And then we talk about the problem where if you're a farmer and facing floods in Bangladesh, emergency relief isn't going to help you for the next season. You need income stability, you need better farming techniques, you need to be less dependent on systems that are exploiting you. Um, and then I guess going into where the Bangladeshi diaspora fit in. Um, so we're asking, how do we mobilize the diaspora differently? And when we're saying not as donors, we're saying as investors and in our own communities' futures. It's like how do we because when we've got the capital, when we've got the context, we know which problems are worth solving, um, just because our families are living there right now, living them right now. And I guess a quick summary of how Pushpa works, and really, it's probably the least important part of this presentation, but we're currently a community of around 203. I think does it say 200? Well, 203. Right now, this morning, actually, it's 206 people with roots in Bangladesh, people across the UK, North America, Europe, and everyone contributes monthly. So anywhere from £5 to £100 usually. Currently, we're at around £1,760 a month. So the money goes into a collective fund. We vet the projects through local partners who know the communities. Then our community votes on which project to fund. And once we've voted, we deploy the funds through our implementing partners and we track everything publicly. So there is essentially full transparency. I mean, you can literally see every transaction on our website. And the key difference is that the diaspora decides what gets funded. And currently, 100% of the contributions go towards the projects. And really, our focus is on economic sustainability, and we're not necessarily interested in short-term fixes. So this is the exciting stuff, less about Pushpa and more about the work. So let me tell you about Project Folon, which is our first project that we launched in northwest Bangladesh in an area called Gaibanda. So this is a riverbed region that faces flooding every year. The farmers lose their crops, their income disappears, and they essentially have to or are forced into taking loans from middlemen, charging around 20% monthly interest. And as you can imagine, that's a cycle that keeps them vulnerable. So what we did, we funded 13 farming families with £1,300 through one of our partners, Give Bangladesh, and an agri-tech partner called Anchor. These farmers got quality seeds and fertilizers. So the seeds and fertilizers were essentially chili and corn, just because they're a lot more climate resilient than some of the other seeds that they traditionally use. We provided them with training in modern farming techniques, given they're very well behind in these techniques. And the I don't know, can you guys see the slides by the way? Is it moving? Are we
I
on Project
think,
Four?
no, I think it's moving quite slowly. Maybe,
Okay.
oh, here we go.
Is
Yeah,
this
now it's come to Project Full.
okay?
Yeah,
Right.
there we go. We can see some pictures now.
Okay. I mean, I'll go through that. So you get to see Project Follow. Sorry, I really want everyone to see the images as well. So yeah.
They
Um,
are beautiful.
yeah. So just to give you a quick overview of what we did in Project Follow. So essentially we provided them with soil testing and analytics and data, which essentially helped them to improve their farming through Anchor. Then we gave them financial management training, so things like savings and investing in the following year. And then we gave them direct access to market. And what we found essentially was that following the 6 months is that people like Chanmia over here, he essentially saved, so he increased his yield by around 28%. And his quote to us when we met him when we were in Bangladesh to meet sort of the midway or towards the end of the project was that this is the first time he could buy his kids new clothes for Eid. Shanti Begum over here, great woman, she increased her yield by 20%. Her I guess what she was most proud of was the fact that she was able to earn and contribute as much as the men in her family for the first time, just through this project alone. And it's providing people those tools, those techniques to really develop that. Then you look at Mohammed over here, and I'm with Mohammed over here in his shop, right? So what he did was with the increased income and the increased yield that he got, he started buying and selling farming equipment. So what he essentially did was looking at new income streams that made him less reliant on crops, which essentially, like we say, are completely getting obliterated as the years go on due to climate change. And he's finding new income streams to try and not be all well, not always be affected by potential floods and potential cyclones. And as you can see, we were very happy entering his shop. I did have a really nice tea in there as well, which was great as well. The second project was Project Grow. So we're currently going through this project. So this was actually in the southwest region in Shatgira. So this project was essentially about um, helping 10 families in an area that's constantly affected by floods and cyclones, where women and men are constantly trafficked, have risks of early marriages and consistent floods, like I say, and cyclones. Our focus here was how do we help them create sustainable businesses with one condition. The condition was that they had to have a child that stayed in school due to this. Reason being is that as much as we look and love to focus on the present, even when you look at climate adaptation and economic sustainability, we're thinking about how do you affect the next generation. So anyone who was joining this program or anyone who was getting funded needed to agree that they would keep their child in school to avoid them either getting married early, either going to exploitative countries, or working in exploitative jobs. And where did we get to so far? So this is currently ongoing, like I said. So four families have opened small corner shops. One family started a cattle fattening business. Three families started rearing small goats. Two families launched sewing businesses. So it's been a really good start. And this is actually great in the way that they've actually got income or sustainable income, but also gained assets that continue to help them increase the income that they get and creates a really sustainable cycle for them. I guess why does this work for us and why does this work with us? I guess what we found, and I think Fahmida and I had a conversation about this relatively recently, was, I didn't necessarily, I mean, climate adaptation or climate change wasn't something that I naturally thought of until Pushpa really that often. But what I've worked out and what we've worked out as a team and an organization is that actually economic empowerment is climate adaptation and vice versa. And we need to think about it because it affects us and our people every day. Um, what also works is that people have been sending money back home for generations, and we've seen that come and go. And what we've found is that our community, the ability to vote on the projects that they want to see funded, the ability to see that transparency around the funds and where the funds have gone, and how we hold ourselves accountable to what we're spending our money on, how it essentially builds that trust and makes it work. Um, the other bit is how we avoid, I guess, diaspora savior complex is one of the big ones that we think about every day, right? So one of the big things that we're constantly focused on is how do we implement projects? I mean, ultimately, we just fund projects that local partners are implementing. And the reason why we do that and we will continue to do that is because Bangladeshis know their own problems and have the solutions to them. The access to funding is probably the biggest challenge that they face. So us going in there and telling them what they need to sort out is, I mean, is never going to happen. And I don't think it necessarily works, right? We see it time and time again. So having that ability and allowing the communities there on the ground to sustain these projects is something that we're really passionate about, and I think genuinely works for us. The bigger picture for us is the interesting bit around where we want to get to, what we've done so far, and where we want to get to. So currently we've got 206 members. I know it says 202 across the UK, Northern America, Europe, and quite a few in Australia. Currently deployed 9K with 1,300, more than 1,300 lives improved or impacted. We're just about to close our final vote for the year, which adds another 50, 60 people, which is a really cool project about bees and honey and allowing new income streams to and helping people become beekeepers. I could talk about it forever, so I didn't add this to this presentation, but that's the next one. But I think most importantly is that we're trying to prove a model that we believe genuinely works and we have seen work. And I think that's the most exciting bit about what we're trying to do. And really, and honestly speaking, it isn't just about this model. It's not just about Bangladesh, and it's more than Bangladesh. It's more than climate, and it's more just about us and how, as a community and a diaspora community, we can really enable change in a way that, look, we've seen. And I don't think, given current climate politically and economically, there's no other way to do it other than using ourselves to be that vehicle for that change. So that's what I feel, longer term, we'll see more and more of this, and we've seen other case studies where it works. So thank you. Apologies for the slight mishaps with the presentation. Follow us.
No.
Thanks for Hamida. Thanks for Climate Outreach. But yeah, follow us on Instagram, Push for Fun, TikTok, etc., and check out our website. Feel free to have a look and drop me a message if you've got any more questions.
Oh, beautiful, Mahia. And thank you so much for sharing. And no, we got to see all the beautiful pictures, so it all worked out in the end.
Okay,
No
that's
worries
fine.
at all. Totally fine. Thank you so much for talking us through that. That was fascinating. And yeah, we'll come back to like a discussion about more of what you shared in a bit. For now, I'll hand over to Samia if you're ready.
1 second.
No worries.
Oh, sorry. I realized my camera was on. Uh,
There we go. We can see you.
yeah. Also let me know if my slides are moving or not.
Yeah, I will do.
Yeah.
Okay, I think they're just loading up.
Um, there we go.
It's taking a little while to load up, but I think it'll pop up any second.
What do you see right now?
It's just a blank screen at the moment, but I think it says we're viewing your screen, so I think it'll come up in a
Okay.
second. Yeah, or maybe try resharing again.
Okay.
Yeah, like stop sharing screen and try again. Yeah, screen sharing is being super slow on Zoom webinar today.
Yeah. Um, let's see if yeah,
There we go. I can see that.
cool. Full
Yeah,
presentation.
yeah, it looks good. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, hello everyone. My name is Samia. I actually say the anglicized way, and I realize I'm in a conversation with diaspora people. So, it's pronounced Samia, but people have butchered my name, so I've anglicized it. It's a thing. I need to reclaim my name. But yeah, I'm the founder of the People's Arc, and the motto of the People's Arc is "It's our future. Let's build it together." And the essence behind the People's Arc was simply just about me just being frustrated about people trying to reinvent the wheel and not considering the fact that we already have the answers for modern problems and realizing we already have experts and heroes on our doorsteps to tackle the issues we face across the world. So, just before I talk about the project, it's on the next slide, right? You see about me, right?
Yeah, we do. We do.
Sorry. Um, and just a bit about me, I'm a climate justice educator, as it was mentioned earlier, and I spent lots of time for the past 10 years campaigning for environmental justice. And that looked like facilitating workshops with kids as young as primary school level, all the way to university professors. So I've done work with Oxford University, I've done work with UCL, LSE, and just getting people at different skills to understand how to talk to each other better and how can we co-create solutions together. And I spend lots of time of just making sure that environmental science is accessible to those on the ground. And the reason why I do that is because when I study geography and environmental science, I realized, oh wow, I think everyone should know this about what the Earth is going through and how to protect and conserve it. I learned so many facts about air pollution and weather patterns and climate patterns. And I just remember sitting in my lectures where it was only around 20 of us. I just thought, I'm pretty sure this should be public knowledge about how our planet functions because we spent a lot of time creating foresights around what the future looks like for different regions across the world. So earlier we heard from Mahian just talk about Bangladesh's situation and just seeing how it's prone to the harshest impacts of the climate crisis. And that was something we learned on a regular basis, but I realized it wasn't really common knowledge. So I realized I needed to make sure that this knowledge wasn't too jargony, overly technical, and just accessible to the everyday person. And then I recently finished my master's at UCL studying sustainable resources, economics, policy, and transitions. I come from a faculty that loves long titles, but what it essentially means is ecological economics. So how do we design economic systems that centers well-being, centers, non-extractive industries, making sure that we're centering the well-being of our planet and its people, and making sure we live prosperous life no matter what borders you're born within. And I recently joined the School of International Futures as a next gen fellow practitioner. So my skills are mainly focusing on how to design models and frameworks for us to predict, well, not predict, mainly like mapping futures. So like seeing the potential risk that comes with climate change beyond the surface level of, extreme events. How does it affect people's mental health? How does it affect global governance? How does it affect international institutions and the way they decide to shape global policies? And yeah, as I mentioned, I founded the People's Arc, which is around centering marginalized and working class voices. And as well as that, I also founded the Black Ecofeminist Network and just bringing back Black ecofeminist thoughts to this horizon, because I don't think people realize when you study the history of Black liberation, Black communities have been speaking about environmental justice for a very long time, especially as many of our communities spend lots of time and work on the ground, tending the land, and using the knowledge from the earth to shape our cultures. So my background is I'm from Sierra Leone and my dad is from one of the most indigenous communities in Sierra Leone, which is the Limba community, and they're known as like the Bushmen or the agriculturalists. And in that culture, we're very in tune with the cycles of our crops and harvests. So we know what conditions are needed to feed our families and our communities. And everything we do is around the resources around us. And unfortunately, Sierra Leone has had a bad rep due to the blood diamond crisis, where we saw Western powers over extract our land for the profits of Western powers. And yeah, I'm very interested in mapping out futures so that we don't replicate colonial practices and activities for not just my community, but for all communities. And that's why I really appreciate this space of being surrounded by people who are from different racialized backgrounds and sharing our histories and stories with each other, because I think it's so important for us to have these hubs and spaces to exchange solutions, but also the lessons learning. And I really love the presentation before about economic resilience, which is super important, especially when we talk about transforming economic systems. So before I continue, I'd just like to give context to where Sierra Leone is. It's in West Africa, well, coastal country. Highly recommend people to visit. People come for our beaches. We're very chilled, warm people. But unfortunately, our history is tied to British colonialism. So it was actually the British that colonized us. And they mapped out that we were just a very resource-rich country. So people know us for our diamonds, but we also have other critical minerals found along our rivers. And what also mining takes up 7% of our GDP, and 60% of our GDP is agriculture. So everything that is to do with our economy is to do with land. And I was recently in Sierra Leone for 3 months researching about what do we need to ensure energy just transition. Because unfortunately, Sierra Leone faces energy poverty, where we're seeing around 5% of the population has access to constant electricity. And I'll put constant in quotations because we go through blackouts, and because of corruption and weather events, we see that electricity isn't an everyday privilege like we have here in Europe. And the general purpose of the People's Arc is just connecting communities together who feel disconnected, disempowered by the systems we live in. And my whole mission is just to make people see that they are change makers themselves, because I really try to move away from this model of this savior ideology where it's like, I'm the individual, I have the best ideas, therefore I know what's best for communities, which was also mentioned in the previous presentation. And it's just about equipping people with the tools and power to create political change and economic change. And many people say, oh, I don't have the academic background or the qualifications to actually do this. And that actually breaks my heart because I think this system makes people feel, oh, you have no power. And that is not the case at all. As someone who spent lots of time working in local government and in parliament and in different political spaces, people don't understand that there are so many opportunities to affect change, but we have poor political infrastructure and education in this country for people to recognize that. So I'm basically like the person who's like connecting and weaving communities. It's not about me being the singular person who's changing the world. It's about how do we collectively create change and recognize our collective power. So yeah, I was just disheartened by the way people were talking and um just to there was a lag on my screen. Can you see like highlighted words like joy, celebration, fulfillment?
Yeah,
Okay,
we can.
cool. And yeah, the People's Arc is just about centering people, making sure with shared skills, empowerment, and making sure these efforts are intergenerational, intercultural. So one of my core values as an activist is making sure that I am the good ancestor. Ancestors came before me, and I need to do the same and pass it on to future generations. And how do we keep this thread going? Because it will be frustrating when future generations come in and they see problems persist and say, oh, well, no one's actually gave us the tools to actually continue the work. So I'm all about educating young people in particular and making sure that they build resilience in times of crisis. And that is something I take a lot from Black ecofeminist writers such as Octavia E. Butler, Toni Morrison, you've got Zora Neale Hurston. And when you read their books, it's all about equipping our communities with the power of foresight, but also the power of just archiving and documenting things for future generations. And my dream is for us to talk between in different generations and share our power and knowledge with each other so that we can dismantle these systems that have been caked in for centuries. And the People's Arc is about meeting people where they're at. So I don't like to throw academic papers at people. It's all about making sure that the knowledge we're sharing is accessible and making sure that it's fun, it's not too arduous, it's not overwhelming. So that's something we really value. So this was the launch and it's very like people first. There's always food. I always have a DJ. It just needs to be good vibes. I'm not really a fan of academic spaces. I just feel like learning should be fun and I can't hate when people say, "Oh, this space was boring." It's like, well, we're grown to change these spaces, right? So I try and use my power to make spaces and places more fun. And as I mentioned, I was in Sierra Leone doing research about an energy transition, and I had the privilege of working with an organization called Smiling Through Light and just supporting them in building the capacity to do the work that they do in Sierra Leone. So in Sierra Leone, we have the capital, which is Freetown, but Smiling Through Light recognized that lots of activities, especially NGO and activities, were taking place in the capital city, but not focusing on the provinces. So we worked in areas called Lonsa, Buea, and Port Loko. And Smiling Through Light is about equipping women with the skills to build their own solar panels in their houses. And when we were doing community stakeholder meetings, many people said solar panel light, many people take it for granted. Yes, light is an everyday occurrence, but for some people, they said, hey, I feel safer at night. My kid can do homework at nighttime rather than waking up early in the morning and rush through their homework. Many people said our community feels livelier and warmer and safer. And I think we sometimes take for granted what constant electricity does for people. Boya, there was a fact where they said they didn't have electricity for 40 years. So Smiling Through Light came in and said, hey, we're actually going to support you through renewable energy models and see what works. And it's just having this constant conversation with the community, say, hey, do these products actually work? What do you need? How is maintenance? And I really wish I could like articulate the magic of this project, because many people were just hyping each other up and say, oh yeah, like Mohammed helped me so much with just understanding how solar energy works. I can't believe we didn't know about this before. Can't believe we didn't understand the benefits. And some people said, oh, I could be an engineer. Why did I not think that was a reality? So it's just about making people see themselves as part of change. And I just want to reiterate to people saying that Sierra Leone, the economy is based on agriculture and mining. So many people don't really have that many options to go outside to different sectors and industries. So my work is about making sure people understand you could diversify your economies that doesn't rely on extract and exploitation of the land and the people. And yeah, this is just a picture of like us going through like the components um of different solar kits, and just making sure that the women in the space understand what is in the kit, but also just out of curiosity, like teaching them about, okay, this is how exactly solar energy works, and this is how you maintain these equipment. And I will say, when it comes to these initiatives, it's definitely not at its most perfect stage, but it's progress. And when I was doing my research, I had to interview people in the Sierra Leone government about what are the challenges and barriers? And with Sierra Leone, unfortunately, we are very donor-based and foreign aid-based economy, meaning that when projects like this come into the country, it's reliant on funders and external funders. So economic resilience is quite an important component when it comes to implementing and deploying environmental solutions. And when you have many donor-based projects, they will probably give you money that lasts 3 to 6 months, a year at best. And what ends up happening when the money runs out is the project ends. So you actually have public distrust increasing in countries in Syria when foreign um, aid comes into the country, just simply because people think, okay, you're here, but only in the short term. So it's like, how do we build long-term economic resilience to keep these projects going? And I always tell people that when it comes to capacity building and deploying solutions such as these, financial support is important, but there are other ways of giving support. For example, with young people, especially young change makers, I always help them with applications to universities, scholarships, funding, interview prep, CV writing. It's something that we definitely take for granted here in the UK, that some people didn't have access to knowing about these things. I remember one guy said, hey, I've never actually spoke on an international stage before. How do I communicate these ideas? How do I make sure people see and hear me? And that is the fundamentals of the People's Arc. It's just making sure people feel confident to be on that stage and just skill share essentially. It could take an hour of your time per week. So what's next is workshops, workshops, workshops. So if you follow me on my Instagram, which is Samia Dumbuya, you'll know that I'm always platforming workshops of just encouraging people to upskill themselves and making sure that was resilient in the face of the climate crisis. And I could speak on for ages, but thank you guys so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was excellent, Samia. Thank you for sharing. Okay, we'll come back to talking a bit more about that. But Fozia, if I could have you up, shall I share your video?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank
Okay,
you.
cool. Let me get that up now.
That is so amazing. Thank you so much, Samia. Sorry, my brain is Mehan. I'm probably mispronouncing it. I'm so inspired by both your projects. And thank you, Fahmida, for just giving the space for these kind of conversations, which it's really wonderful to be here with people from diasporic communities doing such great work. I am Fozia Ismail. I basically run co-founded Dagan Collective with Ayan Ilmi, who's not here today. And this is one of the gatherings we held at Welcome Collection. And what you see here is a group of people, all, sorry, is that okay to pause it just for a sec? A group of people around these milk vessels, traditional milk vessels that nomadic women would make. And we did this milk soundscape where we interviewed elders in our community around their relationship with camel milk. So Somali society and Somalia is there's a huge Somali nomadic community. They're pastoralists. Camels are a really key part of how people survive in quite a harsh semi-arid landscape. We're also one of the most climate insecure places. And I just want to read you something I wrote from 2016-17 when I was doing research on African food history. So when I moved to Bristol 12 years ago, I was really shocked by the levels of racism and the growth of like this what's it, it was at the time when Brexit, you had all these debates around Brexit and this anti-migrant kind of rhetoric, which has only got worse over the years. But so I began a supper club and I began a food research project all about looking at food and diasporic communities really as a way of resisting this hate. So I published a paper for the Oxford Food Symposium, and it's relevant to this topic that we're talking about. So this is just one of the things that I remember writing in 2016. As I write this paper, I'm aware of the famine that is devastating East Africa. I'm aware because we are always aware of what is happening back home and do what we can to help. We are connected. My mother's sister is still a nomadic, goat herder, camel herder, like many others, and has seen her flock and way of life devastated. I have struggled to reconcile this reality with running an East African supper club. It's felt indulgent and wrong to be commodifying Somali food here while the very people who have inspired the food are struggling. So a lot of that was back in 2016 when there was it had just been a horrific time in Somalia. I think in that time, maybe 250,000 children died. It's not even talked about in the press. It was just the most horrific drought had happened. Is it okay to change the page? And so I started. This is so I started thinking about the way we can support our communities, and basically thinking about this kind of relationship that these women in our communities have to their landscape and what happens when you remove nomads and then you put them in high rises. So I did a project called Camel Meat and Cassette Tapes to work with our elders, and that's where I met Ayan. And from that, we basically sort of started Dagan Collective, and it was all about weaving and looking at the knowledge of our Somali elders with the way in which they would. So Somali nomadic women make the homes from everyday materials that they find, so out in the bush. So, but because we don't have many trees, you have to literally weave whole parts of the home from grasses. So that would have been the traditional thing that would have happened. And so what we were really interested in is this kind of intangible cultural heritage that's also being devastated and lost as nomadic people are forced to move to cities due to droughts. And what happens with that cultural heritage and what happens with that ancestral heritage. And in a way, the whole project has been a little bit about coping with the strain and grief of knowing that climate climate collapse is already devastating many communities. But on top of that, it is also stealing these it will wipe out whole scale cultures, and cultural knowledge. And so we're really interested with the practice of how do we try and engage our Somali younger diasporic communities in that intergenerational conversation with our elders. And the way that we do that is through weaving workshops, essentially, which function as two things, really. One, we're learning traditional Somali nomadic weaving, but which is actually, we see it as health and well-being, a health and well-being practice. And we're bringing generations together and we're giving a space for the Somali diasporic communities who like the push, like basically it is our communities that are doing the main mitigation against climate. They're the ones we're talking about, our taxi drivers, cleaners, nurses, security guards, people in these really lower paid industries who are proportionately giving so much more of their income to mitigate against climate because they're sending money back home, because that is what you do. And any person from the diaspora will understand that that puts a certain level of pressure on some of the most vulnerable communities in this country, the poorest people, the most vulnerable people. And so for us, what we're saying is, how do we in our projects protect those people? How do we create moments of gathering where we can really engage with this topic and hopefully give a space of joy and healing? And the way we've done that is through trying to do more art projects in these community spaces. So one of the things that's come out of this is a project called House of Weaving Songs. This has been it's kind of been phenomenally successful. It's sort of toured internationally. And it's basically, we wanted to create a space for climate anxiety, for all of our communal climate anxieties, but also create a space where communities can also weave alongside this art installation, which is nomadic in itself, and it sits on various landscapes. And it almost is a repository for all of our climate anxieties, but also all of our hopes. And it's inspired by that traditional nomadic weaving where women, Somali women, would build the house. When you get married, you'd have your house weaved and for you. You'd have the whole build, the build will happen, and you would have parties. And this is out in the Mead, this out in the outside of the city in various places in Somalia. And as these women gather, part of the weaving that happens is it's sort of magical because they're they're resilient from gathering. They're passing on these ancestral ways and key bits of knowledge about how you survive on this land. And they're also passing on songs, but the songs act as it's almost act as like instructional manual for how you survive in various systems of in very harsh conditions. But also the weaving itself, there's a tradition where you weave your hopes and dreams into the very fabric of the house. And we wanted to kind of replicate that in a way for our community here and to help younger Somali diasporic people not be hopeless about climate, to engage with the ways in which our ancestors would have tried to gather and key into some of that to help us work out how we survive all of this stuff, the emotional strain of what's happening with climate and the just the sheer injustice of it, which can weigh you down. And I think there's a video next that explains the project, which you can share. Is that the next page, possibly? Sorry,
I think so.
oh, there's videos. So these are examples of our kind of family community workshops that we've done. Here's some feedback on this, and it's been so wonderful because we'll run weaving workshops for Somali mums for Breakfast Club. There's been women who said their mothers who have dementia, this memory comes back. And it's just so wonderful. It's kind of a real magic because people then if it's younger people, they'll go back and talk to their aunties and grannies, and their grannies will be like, yeah, of course we did this. And it opens up a whole new conversation for the Somali diasporic communities that are based here, and opens up new forms of connection between the younger generation and our elders. And one of the loveliest things, I think, it's that moment when we have done weaving workshops for Somali mothers, that bit of saying that this is the only bit of creative activity they get to do, and the impact that this has on their like mental health and well-being. So it's just been such a wonderful, it's just been a really wonderful healing journey. Um, and I think the video might be next. Oh, there's some lovely
Yeah, it's
community
coming up.
images of lovely workshops we've done. It's really lovely. Here's the House of Weaving Songs, and hopefully you can hear the sound that's coming
Can everyone
through.
hear that?
The House of Weaving Songs is a wonderful, interactive musical journey. So we've resituated an aqal, which is a Somali nomadic home built by women, and we have incorporated these beautiful audible tapestries. And when you go into the house, the idea is that the House of Weaving Songs envelops you.
Climate change has been the big thing that has driven this piece, but particularly because people are being displaced. We're starting to think about what happens when that starts to occur, when people aren't able to think about the preservation of culture because they're too busy thinking about surviving. This project isn't about us being the sole preservers of culture, but rather how do we open up a dialogue about this issue? How do we platform the cultures that are going to be lost, and celebrate them?
Once you've interacted with these songs and stories about Somali nomadic weaving practices, you end up having your chance to contribute to the House of Weaving Songs. So it's almost like this is a living house, this is an embodied house. It's a wonderful kind of reflection of a kind of communal effort between everyone in the team, and Ian and I's vision for, how do we have these climate conversations? How do we have these difficult conversations while still having hope and joy?
The thing that we wanted was people to feel like they're not alone. So having the voices of some of our elders, having the voices of others that have been through the APL previously, it's layering those sounds and voices so that you didn't feel like you were alone, but you could kind of express yourself however you wanted. And with the audio, really, we feel like no translation is needed, because actually the music, the rhythms of the conversations, the way that Somali people speak, it doesn't need to be translated.
There's a lot of laughing that happens despite the depressing topic. Actually, I feel like Somali people have had to deal with so many difficult things that I feel like laughing and humour is such a part of the culture, and joy is such a part of the culture. And so we wanted to make space for that and have a different kind of conversation about climate in Bristol. So there was, I think it's been a really key part of the work that we've been doing. And one of the things, there was another page, I think, of just an image of, we were recently in India working with the nomadic camel herders there to highlight the story of the way in which camel herders in northern Rajasthan are affected by climate change. And to really, there's something that one of the camel herders had said, which is, here, this is Gamaram, who's amazing, and he's with his camel, which has been in his family for 10 generations. And it's this thing about who will sing now, neither the camels remain nor the songs, right? Because when you have this, these people have this is our culture. This is, and what we try and do. So we work in our, hopefully you can see some of this work next year at Whitechapel. We've done some large scale weavings, which have incorporated this story of these Rajasthani camel herders and their songs. and connecting it to Somali camel herders. We are all interconnected on this planet. And when you see what's happening with nomadic pastoralism and how they are key to, I feel like their knowledge is also key to how we combat some of these climate issues. It's really fascinating and a real privilege to be able to showcase that through art installations because actually we're educating people in, who otherwise wouldn't know about these stories. So, for example, we've been at British Textile Biennale recently with House of Weaving Songs. 900 school children went through that installation um, and learn about this. And that to us is so exciting. We've had thousands of people who have experienced the House of Weaving songs. It's been at South Bank, it's been at Osaka in Japan, it has been sort of, it's sort of touring. And the idea being, I guess it's a form of educating people, but also really saying to the art world that they also have an obligation to have a broader view on what art is and who does art, because these cultures have stunning artistic practices that will be that will disappear if we don't engage with it. So we're really keen on that. I think there's a quote I'm going to end on with bell hooks, and it's she talks about if we don't remember the songs. Sorry, I can't see it. So we might just have to finish there. Oh, here, I love this quote because this is basically what we're trying to do with this work. If we fall prey to the contemporary ahistorical mood, we will forget that we have not stayed in one place, that we have journeyed away from home, away from our roots, that we have lived dry long so, and learnt to make a new history. We have not gone the distance, but we can never turn back. We need to sing again the old songs, those spirituals that renewed spirits and made the journey sweet. Hear again the old testimony, urging us to keep the faith, to go forward in love. And, that's basically what I want to end on. And I just want to thank everyone really for the amazing work, like that people are, it's so wonderful to learn about other people's projects around this and just the care and love and something, this is real. It's not climate collapse isn't something that's happening to other people. This is happening to our communities. It is happening to our people. It is happening to our cultures. And I'm really excited and hopeful that, about having these conversations and just continuing the work in love. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Fozia. I was really silly for thinking we would have like we could talk about these amazing projects and still have time to like have a discussion. But Fozia, you actually did like a beautiful job of sort of like wrapping that up. And I love the quote at the end. Um, I am just really conscious that time has sort of like passed by, but I think I'm trying getting like one quick question for you all if you're able to like stay on. I just want to think a bit about, and you've all kind of touched on this throughout your presentations, that you kind of meet people where they are, like you don't like lecture people into caring about climate change. And, like you don't want to like force people to kind of, but they're competing priorities. So I want to think about like kind of intersectional justice and like how you tap into the diaspora's like concerns to bring them on this journey. Like for instance, in the Bangladeshi Diaspora Climate Action Group, we have people who are really concerned, who have like a strong passion for like many things like people's mental health. So they'll talk about like eco-anxiety, or they'll talk about like pollution and things like that. How are you sort of like tapping into things people already care about and bringing them along to like the climate conversation a bit more? Because as like Samia said, some people feel very like alienated from this space. So I don't know who wants to go first. Anyone?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Uh, for us, it's interesting. Like I said, I think I said in my presentation is that I didn't necessarily think about climate change and the impact that it had on people, and I know many people who are the same until you started Pushpa, and then you realize everything's interlinked. I think what I've found is that people care about people and understanding the challenges that people go through that are relevant to themselves and one can see within themselves is the best way that I've found it. So when we talk about Pushpa's projects and we present the projects that they need to vote on, usually the scenario is, they've got land, they're struggling with farming, they need more money, they need to create sustainable income, which everyone understands, right? Like that's what will go through everyone's head. That's a common problem for everyone in the world, right? Um, and actually, just them understanding that with the background of climate and the change of climate affecting or being the reason as to why they're struggling with sustainable income, I think that gives everyone a little point, and definitely did for me, is that, actually climate is affecting people in ways that we haven't even thought about. And that's why I don't think it needs to be front and center of everything. I think people just need to understand that how it weaves into everything else in everyone's everyday challenges. And that's how we try and talk about the projects. That's how we try and talk to people about why it's important when it is important.
Beautiful. Thank you, Marianne. Anyone else to jump in?
Yeah, I can jump in. Um, I will just start off with saying is that it's known in climate science that the climate crisis exacerbates everything that exists. So we call it a threat multiplier, meaning that the social justices you see today gets multiplied by the climate crisis. And that is something that I use as like a stark reality for people. And with all the community engagements that I do, I rarely use the word climate or environment. I just start with where people are at. So when I'm teaching kids in secondary schools, it's like, oh, what's your favorite meal? Oh, and then if the meal has rice in it, for example, I say, yeah, this is how, growing temperatures increases like it food insecurity and that affects your mom's grocery shopping bills. And it's like you have to connect the dots to the day to day because the annoying thing about climate comms, as I'm sure you guys know as climate outreach, is that sometimes the comms can be too abstract. I remember growing up, it was about polar bears, the ozone layer, and then everyone's like, okay, but we don't know how this affects our day to day. And with me is people seem to think climate is a separate conversation, which I used to find super annoying because it's like, guys, if you care about the food you eat, the air you breathe, the water you drink, if you care about your family living in a healthy, non-polluted environment, you're automatically an environmentalist. You already care about the climate. You just live in a system that unfortunately isolated you from nature and made you think you're separate from nature. And when you actually do digging into our cultures, histories, and archives, you actually see how people have always had nature in the background. It was always there. It wasn't even a background. It was just embedded through song, oral tradition, which is why I loved your project for Fozio about like weaving songs. It's like actually is there. Like if you look at prints on African and Asian fabrics, it's like plants, leaves, flowers. Those were always there. If you ask your grandma about growing chilies, she will give you an answer about how to do that. Like, when you're sick and your mom talks about natural remedies, that has always been there. But the problem is Western climate comms dominated the conversation. So it kind of made people think, oh, actually, that's a problem for them, the activists. That's not really for us. And I think that's a shame that we've suffered that in the diaspora because when you go back to our countries, people are doing the work. They just don't call it climate activism.
Mm. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think for yeah, I think we've started talking about climate migration a bit more because I guess nomadic, there are 4 million people in Somalia that have been displaced, and so because of the droughts, ongoing droughts. So what happens, like my family have been affected deeply by it. But say when I wrote that paper, it was about food.
Mm.
Really, what a lot of my background has been in food research and food, food scarcity and what that does to communities and but also, I wouldn't have thought it was related to climate. It's not like I thought that was climate related. But I was just really angry about the injustice of what was going on with these droughts and what was happening with people like my family and who haven't done anything to contribute to this climate crisis and yet have had their land, they can't, you can't survive in these places if you're having constant floods. You can't survive if you're having constant droughts. These people are farmers, they work the land. These people are pastoralists. They are of the land. Like they don't have a supermarket to go to and get their food from. It doesn't work like that. So I just feel like it's really using art and storytelling is a really key thing for us, and trying to connect back to our ancestral ways of storytelling is what we try and do as a way of connecting, particularly the Somali diasporic community, to some of these issues. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that was lovely. Thank you all so much. Yeah, so much to dig into, and I'm sorry I didn't get to the questions. They're all available online. They're all doing excellent work that you can interact with. You can go visit the exhibitions, join People's Arc, look into Pushpa. All of these people are just doing excellent diaspora related work online. And we will share this recording as well if you'd like to share this around. But yeah, huge thank you to our panelists. It was genuinely fascinating listening to how you're approaching this in such different ways. It was such a beautiful mix of ways that the diaspora is doing incredible work. So I hope everyone had a good time listening in. Thank you for hanging on an extra 10 minutes. But yeah, thank you all so much. We'll end it here. Please do keep in touch with Climate Outreach as well. We also have other events and lots of research that you can dig into around climate comms. Thank you everyone. Have a lovely rest of day.